guys doing here? Happy holidays, everyone. Welcome to my very special Christmas show. Now, you're probably wondering why I'm wearing a TurboGrafx-16 jacket, but I'll get into that. Come on, let's talk a little bit. Christmas time. Why does it remind me of the TurboGrafx-16? Here's the story. It was 1990, the fall of 1990. My local New Jersey newspaper, the Star-Ledger, had a contest in its comics section. What it was a series of trivia questions about Nintendo and about TurboGrafx-16 games. The TurboGrafx-16 was still pretty new at the time, so I had to guess at some of the answers. So I clipped out the little trivia game and I mailed it away, and then didn't hear back from it for months. Until that December. My parents came up to me a week before Christmas and said, "Hey Pat, a box arrived in the mail for you." I was like, "Really? What can it be?" And this is what it was. It was a TurboGrafx-16 system, which I was not expecting to get. I almost forgot about the contest. But yeah, they sent me this, and they also sent me one of the games for the system, Bloody Wolf. And Bloody Wolf was kind of like a Contra shooter, except with more blood and probably more badass if you really want to compare the two. So yeah, parents gave it to me a week before Christmas. They actually debated to hold it off until Christmas and then give me it, but they gave it to me a week early, and it was one of the best Christmases ever because not only did I get Christmas presents, but I got a brand new system that I wasn't expecting. And from there, I just, fell in love with the system, and because of that, it's probably my second favorite system next to the NES. So much so that I have almost every US game. I have 93 out of the 94 games that were released, except for Magical Chase, which is really the holy grail among TurboGrafx-16 collectors. Really fun game, but it's really hard to find and very expensive, and I'll never get it. So this Christmas, I'm going to examine this very overlooked yet underappreciated gem of a video game system. Join me! And yeah, I will explain why my jacket says Denise on the front. In 1987, the PC Engine was released in Japan. It was a collaboration between Hudson Soft and the hardware company NEC. It was very successful in Japan, taking away a chunk of the market share from Nintendo, and it would be dominant there until the Super Famicom was released in 1990. The US version of the PC Engine, the TurboGrafx-16, was released in 1989, a couple of weeks after the Sega Genesis was. Like in Japan, it performed fairly well in the US until the Super NES was released in 1991. What set the system apart from its contemporaries was its unique style and its attitude, dude! TurboGrafx-16 was not cart-based, but rather they used Hue cards or turbo chips. These were credit card-sized games that were slim and actually pretty cool. Look, you can fit them in your pocket or wallet, or you can fling them at people. Despite being named the TurboGrafx-16, this was actually an 8-bit system, albeit with a 16-bit graphics processor. The graphics rivaled the Sega Genesis, and it matched up pretty well to a lot of Super Nintendo games. One of the other main draws NEC boasted was the Turbo Express, the portable handheld version of the TurboGrafx-16. It was revolutionary in that it used the same games as the main console system. This was unheard of. In fact, it would take another 5 years for another system to do this, when Sega released the Nomad, which also played Genesis games. I'm playing New Adventure Island, a great TurboGrafx-16 game, in the palm of my hand! This is my favorite handheld system by far. Let's take a look at the hardware. The system itself is black and sleek looking. So we have the power outlet, we have the RF outlet. Where's the AV composite output? It doesn't have it? The NES and Sega Master System both did, and they came out years before this, and the Genesis, which came out at the same time, also had it. One controller port? Yes, the TurboGrafx-16 was the first US console to be released with a single controller port. And along with the Sega Genesis, the first to be released with a single controller. I don't know why. The controller looks nice, it's well put together, and it has a built-in turbo function for both of its buttons, with 3 different speeds. Pretty cool. But, uh-oh, this is a pretty short cord for a controller. What is this, 3 feet? The cord on an Atari 2600 joystick is this long. what are they doing? NEC were greedy bastards. To get around these issues, you had to do the following. If you wanted more than one player, you had to go out and buy the controller multi-tap known as the TurboTap, which allowed up to 5 players. This was the first multi-tap ever produced for a US system, but it was a poor excuse to shell out more money just so you can have 2 players like any normal system would have. Never mind the fact that you also had to buy an extra controller. If you wanted composite AV output, you had to buy the Turbo Booster or Turbo Booster Plus, another unnecessary expense. Finally, if you wanted a longer cord, you had to shell out extra dough for the official extension cord. Weak sauce. But let's get beyond these greedy grievances and onto the system itself. At the end of the day, a video game system is only as good as the software that's available for it, and unfortunately that's where the issues really begin for the TurboGrafx-16. Unlike in Japan where hundreds of titles were released for the PC Engine, in the US only 94 Turbo Chip games were released. 94! And most of them were first-party titles produced by Hudson Soft. In Japan, the PC Engine enjoyed a lot of good third-party support. But in the US, Nintendo still had a pretty good and illegal stranglehold on third-party game developers. And since those game developers were pretty much forced to choose between Nintendo and other game systems, they would stick with the big dog. This hurt the TurboGrafx-16 right out of the gate, since they had no real third-party support to rely on. Of course, there were great games released for the TurboGrafx-16. Today, it's primarily known for the Bonk series, Splatterhouse, and the plethora of fantastic shoot-em-ups that were available. If you're a shooter fan, you must grab this system, as the ports on the TurboGrafx-16 were usually a lot better than those on the other game systems. I want to reiterate that this really is the premier system for shoot-em-ups. You have great games like Blazing Lasers, Super Star Soldier, R-Type, and Deep Blue... Oh, okay, maybe not Deep Blue, this is a really weird fish shooter. Another aspect which really hurt the TurboGrafx-16 was the marketing, which was balls. In Japan, the PC Engine was really only marketed in the major cities. So since that strategy worked in Japan, NEC thought it would also work in America, failing to realize that geographically, the US is, 20 times the size of Japan, at least? So if you didn't live near a major city or metropolitan area, odds are you may not even have known this system existed. I lived near New York City and I still don't remember seeing that many commercials for the TurboGrafx-16 or even new games. And when I did, the commercials were either really goofy, so over the top, or unnecessarily combative. Take a look at this commercial that tries to belittle the NES by showing how much better China Warrior is compared to the game Kung Fu. But guess what? China Warrior is a terrible game. Really, it's awful. If NEC really wanted to compare, they should have compared Vigilante with Kung Fu. Since not only is Vigilante a true spiritual successor to Kung Fu, both games were made by the same company, IREM. Then again, that would be awkward using one game to bash another and they're both by the same company. But I'm just spitballing here, trying to help out. And there was the lack of marketing in media. I was totally unaware of TurboPlay, the official magazine of the TurboGrafx-16. Nintendo were geniuses in using Nintendo Power to not only advertise their system, but make consumers aware of upcoming games. And they gave these issues away for free when you first bought a Nintendo system. So Nintendo was not only hooking potential subscribers with a free issue, but getting consumers to pay to advertise future games for the consumer to go out and buy. So while it was always easy to find new information on Nintendo products and games, it was very difficult to get any information or become aware of any new games being released for the TurboGrafx-16. In fact, what I mainly remember was the cheesy kiosk video they would have at Toys R Us that pushed the new games. But unless you were in the store, you would have no idea.
What's coming?
And what about other great marketing ideas like Bonk for President? Yeah, NEC, I'm sure this sold a lot of systems. I wasted my time owning and playing mediocre games like TV Sports Football instead of a great strategy game like Military Madness, which had I known existed, I would have never stopped playing. NEC also didn't do itself any favors by not bothering to import the popular and solid games that came out on the PC Engine in Japan. Instead of playing the great Fire Pro Wrestling series, you had to play the abysmal Battle Royale instead. Instead of enjoying a classic racing game like Outrun, you had to endure the inferior clone Victory Run. And if you wanted a fighting game, you were stuck with Fighting Street on the CD add-on because there was no Street Fighter 2. At least not in the US. Take a look at the PC Engine version of Street Fighter 2 Champion Edition. Now pick your jaw off the floor. Yes, you're looking at an 8-bit system, playing Street Fighter 2 and playing it damn well. How could they have not have released Street Fighter 2 here in the US? What were they thinking? I would have bought this in a heartbeat. This is a very, very close port to the arcade version. This version rivals the Super Nintendo version and easily surpasses the Sega Genesis one. Do your own research. Others have done it. They've made very in-depth comparisons between the 3 different versions just to point this out. Did NEC not want to make boatloads of money? Did they not want their system to succeed in the US? I won't even talk about the awful cover art that adorned most of the early TurboGrafx-16 games. Okay, I'll show you Bomberman. Ugh. And that brings us to the original packing game for the TurboGrafx-16, Keith Courage in Alpha Zones. A packing game is really the company's greatest opportunity to not only show off the technical ability of the game system, but to grab the imagination and hook in the player immediately, and make them fall in love with the system they just purchased. Nintendo did a great job with this when choosing Super Mario Bros. Sega did a pretty good job with this when they chose Ultra Beast, and a fantastic job when they switched over to Sonic the Hedgehog. But Keith Courage? Don't get me wrong, Keith Courage is not a bad game, but it doesn't really sell the TurboGrafx-16 the way Super Mario Bros. Did or Sonic did for their respective systems. If a word can describe Keith Courage, it would be underwhelming, especially in the overworld stages. Your character's kind of a pansy. He walks around real slowly, he's got a weak little sword, and he kills these cute little creatures. There's not even a real threat here. All you do here is talk to weirdos and exploit game glitches to really spam the hell out of these cute little guys and get tons of gold, besides doing some very average platforming on the side. NEC chose this game to introduce the system to the world. And I ask why. Nothing here screams the TurboGrafx-16 really kicks ass. It whimpers, well, this is kinda strange. It's only now when the system really slaps you in the face and says, hey, look at me, pay attention, when you reach the underworld area. Here, your sissy character is now in a robotic battlesuit, and you go to town with a laser sword. This is much, much better than the slow and boring overworld levels, but it's still lacking a little bit. The enemies are strange, but somehow still generic. You have flying skulls, and a mutant with a giant revolver on his head? This is the type of lazy enemy design you'd have if you had your 7-year-old cousin design his own dream game. Besides that, the gameplay is pretty uninteresting. You walk along, you slash, you jump down, lather, rinse, repeat. Don't get me wrong, I enjoy Keith Courage, but again, this is not the game NEC should have chosen for their packing game. Bonk's Adventure would have been far, far superior, especially since Bonk eventually became the mascot of the system. Unfortunately, Bonk's Adventure would not be released until 1990. Even packing in a game like Blazing Lasers, which eventually did become a packing game, would have been a much, much better choice, as at least that would have showed off the great graphics and gameplay this system had to offer. More so than Keith Courage in Alpha Zones. It's clear now that NEC never really had the greatest confidence with Keith Courage. You know why? After they stopped packing the game in with the console, they never even bothered to release the game on its own. Wise decision, NEC. It's almost like you were self-sabotaging. I absolutely adore the TurboGrafx-16, but even I have to admit there was so much wasted potential here that it was a shame. I loved this system as a kid, and I love it now, but I'm still disappointed that it never reached its true potential that it could have attained. It should have went toe-to-toe with the Genesis and Super Nintendo for years. Instead, the TurboGrafx-16 is mostly known as a footnote or even an oddity in video game history. So that's the TurboGrafx-16 system. I didn't go over every little bit of detail, I didn't examine every game, but hopefully it was a nice overview. If you're interested in learning more, there's tons of information out on the web. Go forth and seek it. You'll discover lots of fun. Which brings me to the jacket. And Denise. I met Denise in second grade. We hit it up almost immediately. We both had the NES. We both liked it. And when she found out I had the TurboGrafx-16, I was the only kid in class that had it. And then she would come over to play it almost every day. And we loved it. We played Bonk's Adventure, Moto Rotor, Victory Run, Vigilante, Dungeon Explorer. We had a blast. We grew to like each other a lot, and so much so that I consider her really almost like my girlfriend. I know we were young, but yeah, like my girlfriend. So I decided to take the step and ask her to go steady. And I knew she loved the system, so I decided to get this cool jacket made for her. So it took 4 months of allowance money, but I saved it up. I had the jacket made at a tailor. It arrived, and that day I walked the 10 blocks to her house to ask her out and give her her jacket. And there she was, making out with Kevin Glodak. We were young, you know. I got over it. I mean, we're just kids. Kids make stupid decisions, so, you know, I just turned around, I took the jacket home, and she never spoke to me again. Not even in school. But hey, I got over it. I'm okay. It's not like I think about that every Christmas that rolls around, right? This isn't just really painful to me at all. This is fine. This is fun. Oh man, I hate this jacket. I hate you, Denise. I loved you all the time we spent together. Oh, ho, ho, ho! More like Denise, Denise, Denise! Oh, I'm sorry, Rob. It just gets to me. Presents? Rob, you really got me presents? Oh, Rob, you shouldn't have. Oh man, I wonder what these could be. Wow, Rob, it's a boxed Konami laser scope. Thanks. A Rollin' Rocker. One of the worst peripherals ever made. Thanks, Rob. Why don't you just get me a gold needle to shove into my eye? Well, it is the thought that counts. Stockings? Oh man, this is great, Rob. I love stocking stuffers. Alright, well. Double dribble in the box. Thanks, Rob. This must have set you back quite a few dollars. As in, literally a few. What's next, Rob? A Genesis game? Oh yeah, it's a Genesis game. What's the last one gonna be, Rob? A PS1 game? Yeah, let me guess. Tekken? Magical Chase? Rob, you actually got me Magical Chase? The holy grail of TurboGrafx collecting? The one game I was looking for? Oh, Rob, I can just hug you! Okay. Oh, you're the best, buddy! But how could you afford this? You're so funny, Rob. Well, Merry Christmas, everyone, and have a great and happy New Year. I'm going to play some Nashville Chase, but I'll see you back here in 2011.